everybody, and welcome to the January 20th Trips and Traps. I'm Andy Serling, joined by Eric Donovan.
5 races to bring you this week in 2 separate segments. We'll get things started off with race number 6 from January 11th. This is a claiming race, 35 to 25, going a mile. And we'll start it off here, taking a look at 3 horses, the 6 Pony Colada, the 10 Majestic Hope, and the 13 Bernie the Maestro. Yeah,
I will sort of try to pick them up as they head into the first turn, and these horses have different kinds of trips. Pony Colada, who ends up finishing second, is back here. Outside of him is Majestic Hope, who was stepping up and ran very well. Bernie the Maestro was chasing what was a pretty hot pace, or a contested pace, I should say, and a pace that ultimately fell apart.
Yeah, I don't think anyone had, necessarily any significant trip, maybe aside from Pony Colada in the stretch in here. I just thought it was an interesting race to discuss kind of pace dynamic and how it affected the rest of the race in here, because the fractions of this race are 24-2, 48-3, which, could be kind of in the middle. Doesn't seem like it's all that fast, not really all that slow, but the race really falls apart and collapses late, so I think the pace was actually on the quick side here, and the horses that are running toward the back of the pack are going to be the ones that do most of the damage here.
I think you bring up a very valid point. I mean, looking at fractions, not saying it's deceiving, but sometimes I like the horse who was in front in this race, and I remember thinking, they're going at a very comfortable pace, he'll be fine. And ultimately, the pace totally collapsed. Now, maybe the horse I like just stunk, but I tend to think that it's more a case of what you're talking about. The pace was contested, the horses in front are reasonably good. Now, Bernie the Maestro was over his head. He needs a class relief, and he needs a more comfortable trip. I thought Majestic Hope stepping up, because he was a contender all the way, ran well. Pony Colada, you'll keep your eye on, and we'll focus on him a little bit later. I think he gets a little bit blind switched, but ultimately it might be one of those blind switches that enabled him to make the last move, and I don't think he was being the long shot winner, and he probably finished about as well as he could have.
Yeah, I agree. And here's an interesting part of the race where the rider of the 13, Bernie the Maestro, elects to stay inside and not go outside. Now, I don't know that Bernie the Maestro would have done any better than, where he finished in here, but I thought, he might have been better off serve going outside. And, of course, you have the 10, Majestic Hope, who's in the yellow silks, down toward the inside there. And then we have Pony Colada in behind horses who's going to get, as you said, blind switch. I don't know. These horses, I would have liked to see them with a different lane in the stretch to see what they could have done here.
Listen, this is one of the problems I have with David Cohen, who rides Bernie the Maestro, and this is just my opinion. And I see what you mean. Like you say, where was he really going from there? I wish David would go outside in the clear with horses more than going inside all the time. I just think horses respond better when they get a chance, as you could say Pony Colada did in that race, when they get a chance to get out in the clear. I think Bernie Maestro is probably tiring from chasing, and he wasn't going to beat at the end. I don't think you're suggesting otherwise. But I agree with you. I prefer, in general, when these horses want to make their runs, get them out in the clear. There's nothing wrong with saving ground if you can, but when the field is coming, get yourself in the clear, otherwise you get in trouble.
I mean, he was in that spot the whole time pretty much, where he could have just tipped out 3 wide and, had a clear run there. That did not happen. Just an interesting race, and I think, maybe you want to upgrade the chances of the horses that were on the pace last time in this race in here. And, the winner, Indy Cent, obviously took advantage of the collapse in here, 51-1 winner. Pony Colada was claimed out of this race by David Jacobson, but had that, kind of troubled trip that people will think he had, trouble in the stretch there. So those kind of horses, I would tend to, maybe give a little bit more of a, maybe overlook a little bit more in the next starts.
I agree. Pony Colada is a horse that he'll probably be a factor in whatever race he's in, but I think he's going to be overrated coming out of this race, and I'm not a huge fan of his going forward. Majestic Hope, I thought, because he was close enough in the race, and I thought he ran better than expected against some tougher horses. He seems to be a horse who's in very good form.
All right, we'll move on to our second race here, and this is Fair Wit from race number 9 on January 12th, 4 and up, claiming race 15, 2 lifetime. The tags in here, and Fair Wit, a horse that was dropping in class in here, hustled away out of the gate.
Yeah, and listen, I like the ride that Junior Alvarado was giving them. He understood that this was a horse who basically needs to be on the engine to be effective. The problem for him was he ran into 2 other horses that had the same thoughts in this race, including the winner, Chairman Now, who was in the midst of a horse for a big run for Rick Violet, and a horse that Chairman Now was not losing this race. He was ready to win this race. He had the inside position. He asserted his position. He went to the front. And Fair Wit's a horse that went on a hard chase the whole way. He ends up losing this race by around 20 lengths. And I'm not saying he was going to win the race, because he wasn't going to win the race. But because of the dynamics and because of the position he was put in, his performance looks a lot worse than it is. And if he could get himself into a similar spot where maybe he has the speed and it's an easier race for him, he will reverse this finish.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's in a tough spot here chasing, and when they come around the turn to about the 3/8 pole, he's just going to get real tired, and you'll see him start to give it up a little bit, drift out of path in here. But he's done a lot of work so far, just trying to keep up with this front pair and chasing 3 wide on the wet track here this day. And it's a race that behind Chairman now kind of falls apart a little bit, with Worth a Buck coming up for second and Wheelie's Law for third, and Worth a Buck's making that move right now in the third spot there. And he's a horse that has had chances, and probably get better a little bit off this race.
I want no part of Worth a Buck. He can't get by. He gets perfect trips, and I bet him, and he can't get by horses. I think it's a good example, this race, of what are legitimate excuses. And we do this, horses we bet, and I had liked Fairwitten here. You say, did he just run poorly, or did he have an excuse that I could forgive this race? And that's something that's going to go a long way, how well you determine excuses, how well you do as a horse player, because you don't want to just say, I like some horse, I can't be wrong, he ran poorly, I'll bet him back next time. You want to say, this is a horse that ran poorly, that I can make a valid excuse for, this horse that ran poorly, that there is no valid excuse for, and I don't really want him going forward. And I think that's what you have to determine. And to me, Fairwit's an example of a horse not a valid excuse.
Yeah, absolutely. And his effort was almost too bad to say it's a poor effort. I mean, something had to have gone wrong there, whether it be the trip or something else happened to him.
He didn't like a wet track.
And he doesn't like the wet track, but he just ran too poorly to be. If he was up there chasing and kind of flattened out a little bit late and got beat 6 or 7, then I would say, okay, well then you got a decision to make. But the fact that he just gave it up at the top of the stretch there, I just think he's a better horse than that. And he'll run better next time.
And he was claimed by Bisnath Parbu, who's run a few horses and done sneaky well here. I expect him to run well the next time. We love and need your comments, trips, and traps at NYRAInc.com.
Come on back for the second segment.